So welcome to this dialogue of the European Heart Journal. It's first of all my pleasure to thank the editor-in-chief who gave us the possibility to hold this meeting today as the weekly journal scan team. Together with me are Giovanna, Liuzzo from Rome of the team, and Folkert Asselberg will be the discussant. And the guest today will be Thomas Lüscher. This is, as you probably know, a streamlined connection, and you can raise question at any time. This is an informal sort of meeting, and so you can ask your question whenever, either by chat or by raising your hands, and we'll try to give you the microphone. And the guest today is Thomas Lüscher. Thomas is known to most of you, I guess, so the introduction will be very short, but Thomas is a long-time friend, and I appreciate that he accepted our invitation today to discuss this very up-to-date team, which is artificial intelligence to enhance several things in medicine, but in this case, the cardiovascular risk scores. So we'll focus mostly on this. Thomas has been the director and chairman of the University Hospital in Zurich, and he's responsible for the research, education, and development at the Royal Brompton in London. He has had many commitments in his life, has published many papers and books. And what I want to say now is that he's also mentored many important cardiologists around the world. Thomas currently is the president of the European Society of Cardiology. So it's a privilege and an honor for me today to introduce Thomas today. And as usual, in this type of dialogue, the first question is not a scientific question, it's just a general question. Thomas, what do you think has been the most important sliding doors in your career?
My most important encounter was with a man called Paul Van Hoot at the Mayo Clinic, where I learned that humor is important in science, that science must be fun. And I also learned that it's important to have a good group around you, that you can only win when you have the best fellows possible, and that you have to make sure that you help them to develop in their career. And I think today I'm very proud of the fact that many of my fellows got chairmanships and professorships in many countries, and that's even more important than the rest of it.
Yeah, and how did you get involved in the machine learning and artificial intelligence use in the latest years?
Well, in a sense, like 4 years ago, I thought that this is very interesting, and we did a first congress in London, and there were only a limited number of people coming. And then we did the one online to save money with Paul Friedman and Coris Antoniadis. That was well watched, and so I really was fascinated, and I got the gut feeling that this will transform cardiology into a completely new chapter, very much comparable to Grünzig's famous balloon angioplasty in 1977 that made cardiology an interventional discipline. And this now will foster cardiology further. It will make us into a digital cardiology discipline. And at the European Society of Cardiology, we now made this a major strategy of this mandate. And we had, as you may have heard, we had a congress in Berlin called Digital Cardiology in November last year. that attracted more than 800 people. And they were a bit different. There are a lot of young people, a lot of startup companies, not the classical pharma companies. So I was very excited. And then, of course, we wrote a review in the European Heart Journal, and Filippo, who is difficult to convince in this regard, kindly accepted it. So this I also was able to write with Paul Friedman, Charis Antoniadis, and one of my good fellow, Florian Wenzel, with whom I continue to work in this area.
So, do you see any, progress in the interaction between humans and artificial intelligence in terms of, getting together for the progress of medicine rather than raising concerns, as many people think?
Well, lately I asked Laura from ChatGPT, what is the cardiologist of tomorrow? And because I wasn't sure, but she convinced me that this is a person that learns about digital data, learns about how good the data are, how algorithms are developed, on what sort of data sets. And she also mentions that, the clinical examination until robots are coming is still very important, also for the contact with the patient. There's this emotional aspect. And that, of course, there's also ethical issues we have to consider. And that judgments of a doctor still plays a role, because often data are not clear. Sometimes we have trials, like lately we had my former associate, Ulf Landmesser, now at the Charité, publishes suddenly a paper that you have an increased mortality when you put in a plug into the left atrium. And so the data are not so clear. And so here we still need some judgment as a physician, what to make out of it. And so I think there's still a role for the physician, but it will change. So for instance, classical things, we learned ECG over months and years, and we think we are the kings of the ECG, but we're not. We had to realize that the ECG will be automized. I would also predict that, and I say this actually when I give lectures to young people, like I did at King's and at Cambridge lately, I wouldn't go into imaging, because imaging will be largely automized. But of course, basic science, as Peter Libby will not, still needs a brain. And so I think the profile of the cardiologist will change. And it is very important that the ESC takes a lead here in showing the way into the future. And that's what we try to do.
So I don't want to take time to the questions. We have 1 hour. This will go on YouTube. So there will be possibility to watch it for many other people. But we have a very distinguished panel of, in the audience today. And beside Filippo and our team leader, Carlo Patrono, I see many other people. So what I'll do now is turn the podium to Giovanna to introduce the discussion and our discussant today.
Thank you, Massimo. Thank you, Professor Lüscher. The topic today is indeed about the possibility to use artificial intelligence to improve our capability to predict risk. And we moved from a paper that was published on Lancet, coming from your group, indeed, that was the improvement of the GRACE score with the GRACE 3.0 score. And it is my pleasure to introduce our discussant, because in this type of dialogue we have we invite a speaker and then some discussant. So in this manner the discussion will be really very active and productive. And it is my pleasure to introduce our discussant of today, that is Professor Folkert Asselberg, that is Professor of Precision Medicine at the University College of London and cardiologist at the University Medical Center of Utrecht. His work focuses on digital cardiology, indeed, genomics, and implementation of artificial intelligence for personalized cardiovascular risk prediction and clinical decision support systems across large-scale population data sets. So the first question about the core of our dialogue is my pleasure to ask to Folkert indeed, and is this one. Folkert, implementation historically has been the Achilles heel of risk scores in general. What do you see as the major barrier to integrating artificial intelligence-based prediction models into our routine clinical workflows? What do you think?
Sorry, just to correct, is the main challenges to implement AI tools, right? Yeah, so I think what we see today is, especially with machine learning, the advantage of machine learning is that we can incorporate multidimensional data from different kind of data sources. But as you know, it sounds great, and if you're using UK Biobank of all of us, it does work. But if you want to bridge it into the clinical area, then you're stuck with interoperability, right? Integration between different data sources. The data doesn't map to the other data, so we still speak different languages, right? So how you translate your data, your definition of hypertension, blood pressure, or lab values is different across different systems. So we see that there's a clear gap between like the research that we're doing. So I always call it the valley of death between research, the paper, and the actual the translation of clinical implementation. And we just published in European Heart Journal a viewpoint of our editorial team showing, okay, we have to bridge that implementation. I think there's a lot of science, a lot of great products and innovation, but how do you actually implement it? I think that's the main challenge. And I think what we need to do is, in Europe, for example, we have to align with the European Union to ensure that we have a common data model, a common data language across computers, for example, and across electronic health record vendors, for example. And that's what we're doing with the European health data space. And we as European society, what we really try to do is really make sure that we have computable phenotypes, right, across the different systems to make sure that we compare apples to apples and not apples to oranges. But I think you're absolutely right. And if you see the paper of Tom in the Lancet Digital Health in the GRACE 3.0 score, it's still pretty traditional that you have to put in like 20 features or variables into a system. But that's not how you want to work as a doctor. As a doctor, you want to just open up your EHR system and see the risk. And then, of course, have some certainty based on the data that's there. But we still have to force in all these kind of variables, which is pretty static and medieval, if I'm honest, right? And then you want to have it more also temporal. I think that's right. It's still always like a one point in time, but we really want to have this more dynamic modeling as well, and moving towards more what Tom and I are doing, digital twinning, where you can also modify, right? And having some causal AI where you can see, okay, if I change this drug therapy or lifestyle, how does it affect my risk, and having this shared decision with patients. So I think prediction tools are still pretty static. We still have to force in all these variables while there's a lot of data already there that we're not using that can improve prediction. And I think it's not interactive at this point of time where we need to work on.
I think you're absolutely right, Folkert. The GRACE score is not used because interventional cardiologists, like myself, are very impatient guys. And when they have to type in all this stuff themselves, they don't do it. So as you always say, we have to integrate these things into the electronic healthcare system. And in fact, today I'm at the European Association of the Study of Liver here in Budapest. And they just learned me that their risk score for fatty liver disease is now implemented into the NHS system. And the GPs get the risk score that this patient has, for instance, the 5-4 score that takes age, liver enzymes and platelets, and they get a score right away automatically. And that's where we have to go to. I fully agree. Now, the problem, my question is to you, is we have different healthcare systems. Will we ever achieve, you know, a sort of a software that would work in Epic and all the other guys that produce such systems?
Yeah, but that depends on. I know it's depending on where you're from. Regulation is a bad word, but sometimes it helps. Regulation, if we regulate the vendors and make sure that they're using the same language, computer language,
exactly.
and we as a society can at least control that language, right, for cardiovascular disease. But also, I think, Tom, what you're saying is not only interventional cardiologists, it's for every cardiologist. We're pretty lazy in just putting it on this kind of risk scores. I think we just use the data that's out there already, showing the risk based on the data that's there, right? If it's missing or not, and then helping the cardiologist. Okay, if you add or you measure like a troponin or a BNP, how does it increase your accuracy, for example? And then you think, okay, is it worthwhile to ask that information or request that information? But I think we need to have a better regulation in phenotypes, and we have to regulate electronic health record vendors. And I think that's feasible, especially in the European Union.
But you know, one important aspect that I thought we would need to discuss is the quality of the algorithms. Yeah. So, for instance, with Florian and David Adlam, when we developed the OncoACS score, we called our good friend Stephen James and asked, can we have the Swedish data set? And we have also one in Switzerland to see whether it works somewhere else. Because what I learned in the UK is that people are very diverse. When I do my clinic in London, you know, I have a patient that hardly can speak English because they're immigrants from Pakistan. Then the next one comes from Greece, and then comes one a Brit as well. So it's so diverse in England, and this is something that you know, in other countries it's maybe less the case, and people underestimate the diversity of profiles of people. And
I totally agree, Tom. So I think what we do as a clinical society as well is just we have to train people that you have to recalibrate this risk scores, right? Based on the population, right? It really differs whether you're in Amsterdam, London, or whether you're in Budapest, right? The population, your healthcare systems are different. So I think but that's where we need to train, right, young cardiologists and also current cardiologists how to do this. And also we have to make sure that it's transparent how these models are developed, right? So what we are doing in an Horizon consortium now is creating this AI passport, so that you are aware, right, what kind of population this is developed and whether it's actually relevant for your population. So I think we have to develop like globally, but validate it locally, right? So I think there's a clear need, right? Otherwise, we're just we're doing the area on the curve will be like 0.6, for example.
Yeah.
I can ask to both of you, just one question to both of you. Listening to you, it looks like that you believe that in any case we are ready for the implementation of the scores coming from artificial intelligence, and it's something that just needs to be implemented in our systems. Do you really believe that we are ready? I mean, do you believe that there are sufficient proofs that scores like the 3.0 help us in selecting the therapeutic strategies for the patient, for example, because the GRACE 3.0 also was able in the analysis in the paper published in the Lancet, was also able to identify patients with NST elevation coronary syndromes that will have a better outcome if treated very, very early with an invasive strategy. So the question is, do you think that we are that we will take a lot of advantages in using these scores? It is just a question of implementation?
Yeah, so I think if you ask the question, do we need more scores? No, because we have hundreds of scores, right? I think what we need, and I think that's Tom writing his paper as well, we need actionable, right, prediction tools, right? That's showing, okay, that you have predicting, right, that indeed that the early invasive treatment actually will benefit patients on the long term as well. So I think what we need is more trials, right, connect to these prediction tools that change our management. Because I think we have more than enough prediction tools already that perform well. But Tom, go ahead.
Well, I think that prediction is, of course, one thing. And then, of course, what do we do with it is a second one, you know, because eventually the dream of precision medicine is to have a personalized prediction for a given patient. And then that this will actually guide us better to have a personalized management. And that's the next step, of course, that needs still some work. But I think what we can say now, never in the history of cardiology have scores been tested in such large data sets like today. I mean, that's what you see that. And in some, it's, you know, I recently had to read the paper and they developed a risk score for using MRI, and they had 900 patients. And I must say that's another aspect that needs to be a criterion of whether it's ready for prime time. Any of these scores is how big it was the data set that they developed it from. And I think in imaging in particular, they are big ones. There has now been a paper in Nature Medicine with 175,000 echoes. I think that's really a solid database that will provide algorithms that are extremely useful clinically. But if you start with a few hundred or a few thousand, then of course that would not be the quality standards. And that's really what I mentioned earlier, what the cardiologist of the future has to realize is very much like reading papers, trials now. Is the trial, you know, done in a large number of patients? Is it a small trial with a p-value that's borderline? We have to also look at this for prediction models. And then, of course, the next step will be how to actually take therapeutic or make therapeutic decisions based on this. Because of course the risk is only the first step in the management, and the real issue is, does it help us to reach better decisions when we know precisely what the risk of a given patient is? And here I think we made huge progress, because if you ask 10 cardiologists out of the blue from their belly, you get 10 answers what a high-risk patient is. And here we have now a much better standard.
Yes, there's a question from Eloisa Arbustini. Eloisa, I see you on the platform. You want to ask your question? We can turn on your...
Yes, well, I wrote it, but in any case, my question is, I mean, I love all this discussions, and but my real problem is how can we be sure about the quality of data, quality of images? 7,000, no, or 700, whatever it is, 1,000 electrocardiograms or echo performed in 10,000 centers from thousands of different cardiologists and machine. I mean, how can AI assist to guarantee quality assurance of data and images used to train AI innovative tools?
That's a very crucial question, Eloisa.
I'm worried about this, Tom, because you know, we hear very, I mean, impressive information, beautiful papers, Nature Medicine, New England, whatever, but about the quality, I'm not convinced at all.
Well, this depends really on, I mean, of course, this is a very, very crucial point that you make. But for instance, in the UK, if we look at outcomes of patients, we know from every single citizen from every single patient with a myocardial infarction, whether he's dead or alive, and whether he was in a hospital. In Sweden, it's the same. In Denmark, it's the same, and in Estonia, it's the same. In other countries, it's much more difficult. We have also a registry on infarction in Switzerland, but it's voluntary. And the voluntary registries are never as representative as voluntary ones, because if it's mandatory, then you know from every patient the hard endpoints. Now, of course, all these different data sets, they look like a Swiss cheese. They have holes here and there, and but now with artificial intelligence, you can also impute values, and we have tested that. You know, for instance, in one other study with one of other colleague, we looked at GDF15 in the data set where we didn't have the values, and we took a data set where we had the values, and you can predict pretty well. But of course, you want real values as much as possible. But you know, in real life, we never have absolute perfection, and medicine is not perfect either, nor are physicians. So we have to sort of live with a certain suboptimal quality. But if you have 100 or 400,000 patients, these problems are much less of an issue than if you work on a data set of 1,000 patients. So this is all aspects that we need to be conscious of.
That's why we really want to have rigorous validation, right? So that's why we need external validation, not a single center, multiple.
Yes.
And I think that's why we also, as a community, really would like to have validation in a real world setting. Of course, as Tom's saying, we always have a selection in those cohorts that voluntarily provide informed consent. So we should move also to more opt-out cohorts, right, in real world and clinical care settings to see, okay, how it actually behaves. It's like phase 4 studies, right, in pharma trials.
There's a question from Filippo, I see. Yeah.
Yes, I have a question, a follow-up question for Folkert. Folkert, some time ago, you published an excellent review in the European Heart Journal on the 5 quality criteria, quality standards, papers on AI must respect. I think that this is an important starting point. Quality standards for these papers must be really clear to everybody. Can you please summarize for us what are these 5 quality criteria, which is the starting point for a good product to be published and developed?
Great, thanks, Philippe. So we just published it this week, the updated 5 quality.
The update, yes.
Yeah. So just I can put it in the link later on, or maybe someone else can, or Lindsay can put it in the link, the link to the European Heart Journal viewpoint. But I think what we just discussed, I think, so validation is really key, right? Rigorous validation. And what we're trying to do is really bridge, right, this value to implementation. So we should have what's the interaction between humans and machines, for example, right? What's the effect on the clinical response? So not only a model on retrospective electronic health record data, but we actually want to see if you put it into clinical practice, do clinicians change their behavior, right? Also, it's important, I think, for AI, where it's in the clinical care pathway, right? Where is it embedded? And I think, of course, it's not a point solution. It's not like one drug. It really depends whether it's in the beginning of your clinical care pathway for heart failure or at the end. It really has different effects. So I think a clear description where you want to add value is important. And I think next to the validation, and that's the starting point, is the clinical intent, right? Why are you doing this? Often people just get a lot of data, thousands of variables, and just predict mortality. Why are we doing this, right? I don't want to know that my risk of dying is in the next 20 years 8%, right? It doesn't help me, right? It doesn't help you as a clinician. I had this paper as well where they want to predict, for example, like bleeding for LVADs, and then the number of hemoglobin measurements was the most predictive. that doesn't add value, right? So there's a lot of nonsense out there. So really people have to think, okay, what's the clinical value of that algorithm? What do I add? And if you have that question, make sure that you can really evaluate it, not only on an area on the curve, but also clinical benefit, right? There's a lot of area on the curve and that's it. It's above 0.80, we're happy, but that doesn't help you. You really want to show the clinical benefit and how does it interact with humans. So you have to get at least vignette studies, but preferably prospective trials showing the behavior of is adapted by clinicians and how they interact. Of course, otherwise we all have these alerts in our Epic systems or EHR systems that we dismiss, and then it's useless.
Thank you. Can I expand on one of these quality criteria, which is the external validation, which is a key point in developing these models? And I'd like to involve Tony Armundas. He is very interested in external validations, and looks like that not all external validations are born equal. Tony, can you tell us what is your view on this point?
Thank you very much, Dr. Crea. This is external validation is a challenging concept, and I think it has to be viewed. It has many levels during the production. During the production process, which starts from the research and development all the way publication, clinical validation. Because I don't want to take too much time, my view in terms of clinical validation is that model validation has to be done locally. Eventually, because of the diversity, because of all of these issues that are valid issues that have been raised about the diversity, the demographic diversity, and all that we have throughout the world, every hospital should develop processes to validate their algorithms if they want to bring them into clinical flow within their premises. We know that there's algorithm drift due to many factors, including demographic drift, technology drift, clinician familiarity with algorithms, and the consequential drift. So even that process, even if the local validation has to be continued throughout the lifetime of the algorithm, and it is only then that we feel clinicians should be secure, should feel comfortable with the model predictions, the model recommendations, and that, I think, this is my view, and I'll stop here for the sake of the discussion. Thank you, Dr. Crea.
Thank you, Tony.
There's a question from Dr. Gleb Aitzkai.
Very complex one, a very long one.
Very long question. Yeah, can you ask it, or you want me to read it for you?
Of course. Thank you. Thank you for introducing me. My name is Gleb Natsky. When you see somebody, you say hi. You continue with Natsky. Hi, Natsky. Very easy. So actually, this is not one thing. There are comments. The first comment is the quality of AI, which is extremely important, of course. But one should approach the quality of AI, the results from a quality algorithm, the same as any other study. It's science. It's always difficult. Who said that we could easily get easy answers from AI? It's not easy. Secondly, how large should be the data set? Well, I've talked many times. I'm a biostatistician, by the way. I'm not a clinician. And I have 2 PhDs, so, well, it counts for something. One is in biostatistics from America. The other is in operations research optimization from Bulgaria, Southeastern Europe, and the European Union. And so basically, I have quite a few. I've been the biostatistician on many studies, NIH-funded studies, R01 grants, and others. So I have some experience. But the thing is that recently I was mightily surprised when this 44,000 patients versus 550 patients for a cardio study. Actually, it was cardiac rejection study. It turned out that the AUC area under the curve for the smaller size study was like something 0.73 area under the curve. Well, the 40,000, which came from UNOS data study, which is well known, national, was only 0.65. And the question was, why did it happen? It happened so because the clinicians that we were working with, they had added some clinical data, variables and predictors that were present in the 550, the small size, that were not present in the UNOS data set. And the third topic that I dared share my ideas is external validation of, by the way, I teach machine learning to biostatistics graduate students. External validation of a ML algorithm, machine learning algorithm, expects that the validation data set, which, by the way, there are 3 phases. It's training, validation, and testing. So a little bit more correct would be test data set should be coming from the same hypothetical patient population as the data set on which the machine learning model has been trained. So I should stop at this point.
Yeah, Thomas, you wanted to take it?
No, I fully agree, and it is a 3-step procedure, and of course the validation is very important. And the more data sets you have, then it's no wonder if these data that he mentioned in the smaller study have a clinical relevance, then of course it may be better in outcome. But again, a smaller study like the one he mentioned needs also validation in a bigger data set with the same parameters that were successful in the first one. And of course, the other aspect that was mentioned is the change in the profile and the phenotype of patients. It is clear that if you had an infarction in 1950, when Eisenhower had his infarction, maybe the prediction model was completely different than when you have today a patient that already has blood pressure medication, a statin on board, and maybe other parameters might be very important. So we looked, for instance, in a smaller study that we have to still validate, but it's an interesting observation. We have patients that have a high-dose statin, and they get another infarction. And we found that in those, most likely inflammation is more important, that is not adequately suppressed. So when you actually have patients with new medications, then maybe the profile, the phenotype changes, and the prediction model has to adapt as well.
It's still interesting, Tom, that you're putting this remark, which I think is very valid, but we don't do it for drug trials. Well, in drug trials, of course, in drug use, your population changes as well. We're still using the same drugs based on old trials. So, but the FDA now has this, instead of EMA, no, but the FDA has now something, an adaptive algorithm. So if algorithms change, that they can still be in the same regulation. I think that's something what we put in our viewpoint as well, life cycle management, right? So you continuously have to update your weights of your algorithm. I think that's really important. Sorry, there was another question.
No, I would like to bring into the discussion Carlo Patrono, that is our deputy editor, if he likes to say something, because I know that for Carlo, as is not a pharmacological trial, this one is really, something that is out of the horizon. Carlo, what do you think about? And then, if I can, I would like to bring into the discussion also Peter Libby, because I think that artificial intelligence, Peter, for people that works with biology, is becoming something that we cannot avoid. So first Carlo and then Peter.
Thank you, Giovanna. Well, Tom, you briefly mentioned the development and validation of the OncoACS score, which you and your colleagues published recently in The Lancet. this seems to me like a step forward or higher than developing GRACE 3 in terms of the complexity of the clinical setting where you have two concurrent problems, cancer, which can be present or in the recent past, and then these patients develop an ACS. You found by using a very large data set of over 1 million patients that you can actually predict the 6-month risk of developing ischemic events, major bleeding, and all-cause mortality. So can you tell us something about the extent to which this represents an improvement over the previous strategy you're using in the development of GRACE 3, and what we can expect next as the next level of complexity?
Well, I think first of all, these two papers, first of all, as to the validation, Florian and David Adlam did this in Leicester, and then we went to Sweden, not only to a different registry, but also this was done actually by the team in Uppsala. So there is a double security that we have a good validation. And then, of course, you know, what we learned here is that you may have an infarction, but the outcome prediction of infarction, the phenotype of the patients is different if you have an underlying disease. In this instance, we looked at cancer, but we might also look further into what changes occur when you have diabetes, for instance, compared to non-diabetics. And this leads to the real strengths of AI, that is deep phenotyping. So not all patients are alike. You know, we did so far medicine like the Americans bombarded countries in the war and gave it to everybody. And what is an interesting observation that Florian made is I read a book once, it's called The End of the Average. And this is very enlightening because, for instance, take the intelligence quotient. So you have an IQ of, let's say, 120. And but this is just a summary. In this, if you ever did an intelligent test, you will see that you have, you know, tests on mathematical, you know, you get numbers like 1, 3, 8, and so on, and then you have to figure out that it's the square of the difference, and so on. This is one test, and one is spatial recognition, and so on. And although people have the same IQ of 120, some are very good in mathematics, others are very good in spatial. Maybe that's very important if you're an interventional cardiologist. And mathematics is not so important, except when you write the honorary note and so on. And the same applies for trials. So, you know, in this one trial that in digital health, the Lancet Digital Health, we found with Florian that actually some people in a neutral trial have a benefit and others have actually a negative effect. And even also Peter's friend, Paul Ritger, started to publish these waterfall plots. I think they're very enlightening because they show that what we call as the median value is actually not the whole truth. The truth is in the personalized effect of the individual patients, and it dramatically changes. Even with a PCSK9 inhibitor, polls showed that some actually have an increase, you wouldn't believe it, increase in LDL, and others have a massive decrease. And then we report only the average, which is not the full truth.
Okay.
What do you think, Peter?
Peter.
Well, first of all, Tom, you invoked the basic science, and I would say that when you and I were growing up, it was a cottage industry. We did one blot at a time, one assay at a time. Now everything is multiplex, is multi-omic. For example, the single cell data, we end up with three-dimensional representation of single cells, we definitely need assistance from AI and in order to sort through it. Everything is computational now. But the subject here is risk scores, and risk scores are very important for public health. They're very important for the practitioner who has 12 minutes to see the patient to make a decision. But I'll tell you, in my own practice, I don't use risk scores. I'm much more aggressive than the guidelines, and I've written about confessions of an LDL hog. But I'll tell you where AI has transformed my life. It's using the AI scribe in my practice. So when I see a patient, I say, do you mind if I record this for purposes of documentation? They always say yes. I have my iPhone. I press a little button, and I now look at the patient, not at the computer. And then as I'm doing my physical examination, I say quads, full and equal bilaterally. This two is physiologically split, dorsalis pedis, pulses. I go through and I say it out loud. Then instead of staying up until 11 o'clock at night doing my notes, I simply put in, .ambient dash note, and all of a sudden there's a note that's populated that's really good. It needs to be edited, but this is going to get to be better, and it saves me hours, and it makes the interaction with the patient human. So the optimistic view of the application of AI in medicine is it will liberate us to be doctors, go back to the heart of our profession, rather than sitting there treating the computer screen rather than the patient.
Eric Topol wrote this book, Deep Medicine, and I'm sure you've seen it as well. And he said exactly that AI will make us faster and we have more time to talk to the patient. And in fact, this is very important because in the JAMA Internal Medicine, there was a paper where patients could ask an algorithm, an avatar, if you wish, questions about their disease and physicians. And then the patients had to rate the avatar and the physicians. And the avatar was more empathic, which really shocked me a lot, and was actually better in the answer. And the reason is that the avatar is so patient. The doctor after 3 questions says, "Oh God, now I have to move on," and gets a bit irritated. No, the avatar he's so patient, and that's why he wins the race. So that's a good lesson for us. And you're absolutely right to look into the patient's eye. I have a famous writer is my patient, and he writes about his experiences with doctors, and he had a cancer. And so he said, I went to the doctor in the radiotherapy, and he always looked into the computer. He never looked at me a single moment. This is exactly the point you make, and you made a really good point. Yes.
And also, it makes there was a paper in New England Journal of Medicine AI regarding the effect of ambient technology that Peter describes, and you see that the number of burnouts across physicians in the US was declining, right, due to the fact. So regarding cost effectiveness, that was not that positive, but they saw, right, the quality, right, of life of doctors, right, in their working life improved due to the ambient technology because they have more time.
So absolutely.
Said the magic word guidelines. This field is developing at a speed which is impressive. In 2 or 3 years, we now keep talking about AI every day for something, and there is a huge development in designing new drugs, a huge development in profiling cancer types and at the molecular level, and so there are some fields that are developing very fast. In cardiovascular medicine, these papers are opening the field. Of course, it's important to see how much this will uptake in terms of changing guidelines. For instance, we've been changing guidelines only on the basis of randomized controlled trials or huge epidemiological evidence or meta-analysis. Now we have this tool, which is going very fast, which is very powerful, and sooner or later it will impact somewhat somehow on guidelines or other recommendation for doctors. What do you think, Thomas?
Yes, that's a very, very important topic. In fact, I just started, created a task force on the role of AI in guidelines in the ESC, because I think what we had as the guidelines so far are last century, that you have 20 papers, each of them 100 pages. Nobody reads them line by line, and that's why they're not implemented. So a first step we took, and I invite you all to look at this, we created the ESC chat, which is a large language model of all 20 guidelines that are valid. And I think eventually we will have one guideline for everything in cardiovascular medicine. And to achieve this, we also will have the possibility to update it continuously. My vision would be that we have a living document. I already do this with John Cam, Gerald Maurer, Noel Berry-Mertz, and Patrick Serois for the textbook of cardiovascular medicine. Its electronic version is called ESC CardioMed, and there we meet every week. We invite the guideline chairs to implement continuously the new information, so that the textbook is now only electronic, and we will be able to exchange in the fourth edition that we will present in Munich every paragraph, every figure, every table as new data come up. The real question, and we had several sessions already with all the experts in the field, is what is worthwhile to be updated. And I think at the moment I would focus primarily on trials that are, practice changing. For instance, in 2021, if I remember well, Teresa McDonough presented the heart failure guidelines in a session, and at the same session, the PRESERVE trial was presented, and the guidelines were at the moment outdated. And that has to change. And so I think eventually we need a guideline team that meets every 6 months, let's say, looks at really groundbreaking data and decides, so they need some time, of course, so that a year later we have an updated guideline, including things that people want to know. It's not just efficacy. Peter Jüni made a very good point lately by saying that safety is as important. I mean, what do we do when Ulf Landmesser, as I mentioned earlier, publishes in the New England suddenly a paper that possibly left atrial appendix occlusion may increase mortality? And these guys were not stupid. These were the best centers from Germany that were part of the trial. Suddenly, there is a safety concern, and we cannot wait 4 years to make this, known to our colleagues. So we have this committee. I have no final answer yet, but I think this will change as much as medicine in the next years to come. And I hope that I can make an impact here in the near future.
There is an interesting question from Dr. Perk, who asked about what is the essential knowledge in undergraduate and postgraduate medical education. So do we need to include some information on how to approach this in the medical school and in postgraduate?
Yes, I think, as I mentioned earlier, the profile of the cardiologist will change, but the profile of any physician will change. And this needs, of course, some deep phenotyping of our own profession, and see what are the crucial skills for a dermatologist, for a cardiologist, for a pathologist. And I can tell you, because I'm a very bright skin, I have to see a dermatologist once in a while. And in the old days, I would lie down and he would touch me up and down. And now I go to him and they go in a room with 100 cameras and he makes one picture, pum. And I get a polar map of all my spots on my entire body. And we go to the computer and while we change the room, it's already up there. And for each spot, the computer says, is it are the borders clear? Is the color bright? Is the color dark? Does it look like spreading out? And next time I come, he compares everything. So, I mean, dermatologists also will become completely different. Skills are required for them to make sure to see whether the pictures were done in the very right space, and maybe the machine can do this in the future as well. So maybe dermatologists are required in much smaller numbers in the future.
And we started as the EC, right, Tom, to incorporate AI. So we're changing now, updating the core curriculum, and we have different tiers where in the core curriculum AI and digital health will be mandatory, but we're also trying to educate AI specialists in the subspecialties, but also in general AI specialists, which will be more and more important. And we work with the European Heart Academy now to set up a master even in AI. Of course,
yes.
Every center, big center, needs like, I think, a few experts in this field.
Giovanna, if you want to make a final comment or question, because we are approaching to the end. We are only 3 minutes.
We're approaching the end. Actually, I would say something a little bit provocative. Do you think that we need a prospective study to be sure that scores like GRACE 3.0 or the other score with the onco score are useful for the clinical setting, or you think we are fine with the information that we have? Usually,
well, we can always get better, Giovanna, of course. And the first step might be that to use scores in the UK Biobank, because that has prospectively acquired data sets. But anything that's prospective rather than looking at data sets that have been collected a decade ago is better. And I'm sure we will get better and better as we speak. And but this is the process of medicine since William Harvey invented the circulation in Padua.
Tom, can I? Tom, some time ago, you introduced a very nice expression. I really enjoyed that. AI is a co-pilot for the doctor, which is very reassuring. And also based on what Peter said before, I think it's realistic. AI is a good co-pilot. Do you still believe that AI is a good co-pilot?
Yeah, that's what I learn each time when I take a plane, which I have to now as a president. And there are always two people in front. And there's good reason for that.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Okay. If there are no further questions, it's been a pleasure to have you both, Thomas and Folkert, and all the colleagues for this, very interesting question. I wish to thank Giovanna particularly for, her active, role in this meeting today, and I think she's commenting the Onco ACS. I'm not sure, but it's important. And thanks to the journal for giving us the opportunity today to be here. Again, if any of your colleagues want to see this dialogue again, they can find it on YouTube together with all the other editions in the past 3 or 4 years. So thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you also from my side. And before we leave, let me announce the next dialogue, which will be as usual on the last Thursday of the month. Next month is March. And our guest will be Michel Aisaguer, the father of catheter ablation. So will be another interesting dialogue. I am sure. Thank you, all of you, for joining us.